Tanzania. They erupted on Wednesday during polling for Tanzania's general elections, which political opposition say are a sham. Demonstrators have been calling for electoral reforms and for President Samia Suluhu Hassan to than a dozen police officers who've been killed in the violence across the country.
I think the number could even be higher. The police are shooting.
There is chaos in Tanzania. Reports say over 700 people have been killed. The nation's capital, Dar es Salaam, once a symbol of stability, now echoes with chants of revolution. Tanzania's Gen Z has taken control of the international airport, blocking runways and halting flights. And in a shocking twist, unconfirmed reports claim a top government official has fled the country. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who just declared victory with 98% of the vote, has not been seen in public for days. The streets are burning, the army is deployed, and internet access is cut off. For a country long known for its calm, it feels like the dam has finally burst. But what exactly triggered this? How did Tanzania, one of Africa's most peaceful nations, spiral into what many are calling a modern-day revolution? And where does it go from here? In this video, let's find out. Elections are meant to measure the will of the people, but in Tanzania, the October 29, 2025, election became the match that ignited a national inferno. For weeks, tension hung in the air like the calm before a tropical storm. People queued at polling stations, some hopeful, others hollow-eyed, already suspecting what was coming. The ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM, party, unbroken in power since independence in 1961, had long perfected the art of winning. But this time it wasn't art. It was a theater without an audience. Tundu Lissu, vice chair of the opposition Chadema party, languished in prison, accused of treason. His crime? Daring to demand a free election. Luhaga Mpina, head of Acti Wazalendo, had been disqualified twice after defecting from CCM. The message was clear. The stage had room for only one actor, President Samia Suluhu Hassan. On the morning of the vote, the streets buzzed with whispers. People said the ballots were already filled, that soldiers stood ready to maintain peace. By midnight, peace had burned to ash. Ballot boxes disappeared. Police clashed with crowds. Videos leaked before the internet blackout showed voters chasing away electoral officers accused of stuffing ballots. When the results were announced, 97.66% for President Hassan, the number itself was an insult. Even among CCM loyalists, disbelief was visible. Then came the sound that would define the night: gunfire. Protesters filled the streets of Dar es Salaam, Mwanza, and Morogoro, waving flags. At first, they sang. Then, police bullets cut through the songs. Hospitals overflowed. Amnesty International confirmed at least 100 deaths. Opposition groups claimed over 700. The government called it rumors. But as morning light revealed burned buses and blood-stained pavements, Tanzania had crossed a line. That night was not simply a reaction to an election result. It was a release of decades of suffocated frustration. And as smoke rose from the streets, a new chapter of Tanzanian resistance began, one that would soon reach the country's highest symbol of control: its international airport. On October 30th, just hours after the bloody night, Julius Nyerere International Airport, the gateway to Tanzania, fell into chaos. Thousands of protesters flooded Terminal 3, carrying the Tanzanian flag upside down, the universal symbol of distress. The message was unmistakable: help us, the nation is in peril. Flights were grounded. Air traffic controllers abandoned their posts. Even foreign journalists could hear the chants from departing planes. Eyewitnesses said police deployed tear gas, but the crowd did not move. A young woman's voice rose above the chaos. If they shoot us, the world will finally see. Then, in the confusion, came a rumor that shook the capital. A senior government minister had fled the country. The government dismissed it. but flight tracking data showed a private jet departing minutes before protesters reached the runway. Some believed it carried a top CCM insider. Others whispered it was the president herself. Whether true or not, the symbolism was devastating. Power was fleeing, literally taking flight. By nightfall, the airport was no longer a site of travel, but of revolution. Protesters pitched tents on the runway. Drone footage showed thousands forming human chains to prevent takeoffs. Handwritten placards read, "Freedom first, flights later." Tanzania's international gateway had transformed into a fortress of defiance. And yet, this wasn't an opposition operation. It was organic, decentralized, and led by the very generation the government had underestimated, Tanzania's Gen Z. What had begun as anger over election fraud was now becoming something larger, a rebellion against the entire post-independence order. The young Tanzanians on the runway weren't waiting for permission. They were the children of austerity, raised on promises of reform that never arrived. In a country where over 60% of citizens are under 25, they had grown up under CCM's endless rule. They had never seen a transfer of power, only the recycling of slogans. They watched as Kenya's Gen Z forced tax reforms through sheer persistence. They watched Sudan's youth topple a dictator through courage and unity. And they learned a dangerous truth: fear is taught, and it can be unlearned. Under Hassan's administration, GDP rose, but so did discontent. Youth unemployment hovered around 35%. Education budgets shrank. Health systems crumbled. Corruption scandals multiplied. The president's once praised liberal gestures, unbanning newspapers and freeing prisoners, had turned into weapons of control. Media houses reopened, only to be re-silenced. Activists were freed, then rearrested. But this generation adapted. When opposition rallies were banned, they turned to the digital space. TikTok, Telegram, and Zello became their streets. They learned to encrypt messages, to bypass internet filters, to live stream in chaos. When the government pulled the plug on the internet, they switched to mesh networks and satellite relays. Still, movements that rise so fast also draw brutal responses. And as their defiance grew bolder, the regime's patience grew thinner. The morning of October 31st dawned heavy with dread. Armored vehicles rolled through Dar es Salaam. Snipers perched on airport rooftops. The government declared a nationwide curfew. Electricity flickered. The internet remained dark. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Officially, the government called it a security operation, but in reality, it was a siege. The Tanzanian Defense Forces, TDF, were deployed under the pretext of restoring order. Soldiers were authorized to use live ammunition. By evening, eyewitnesses reported gunfire near the airport, where protesters refused to move. Families searched hospitals for loved ones. Clerics pleaded for peace. The UN Secretary General demanded an investigation into the killings, calling the reports deeply alarming. But government officials doubled down. Foreign Minister Mahmoud Thabit Kombo dismissed international criticism as neo-colonial interference. On state television, anchors smiled as they claimed calm has returned. Yet the truth couldn't be contained. Satellite imagery showed black plumes of smoke across central Dar es Salaam. Hospitals in Mwanza reported hundreds of casualties. A leaked police memo ordered officers to neutralize hostile gatherings. It was no longer policing. It was a war against the citizenry. And then came silence. The streets emptied, not from surrender, but from exhaustion. In those dark hours, Tanzania became a place between fear and defiance. The government controlled the airwaves, but not the people's will. Every crackdown only deepened the rebellion's resolve. And from that silence, reflection began on what Tanzania had become and why the illusion of peace had finally collapsed. For 6 decades, Tanzania prided itself on peace. While neighboring countries tore themselves apart through coups and conflicts, Tanzania seemed immune, united under the banner of Julius Nyerere's Ujamaa socialism. But beneath that calm surface lay a dangerous myth, that stability equals justice. When John Magufuli died in 2021, many hoped President Samia Suluhu Hassan would open the country to reform. She did, briefly. She released journalists, reopened banned papers, and promised a new dawn of democracy. Western nations applauded. The International Monetary Fund resumed aid. But as months passed, her rhetoric diverged from her actions. She began governing through what analysts call lawfare, using courts, commissions, and bureaucracy as political weapons. Opponents weren't assassinated in the streets anymore. They were disqualified, detained, or dragged into endless trials. Even within CCM, dissent was punished. When former Ambassador Humphrey Polepole criticized the government, he vanished. His family never heard from him again. By 2024, Tanzania had drifted into a polished autocracy. The West, distracted by global crises, continued praising Hassan as a female reformer while ignoring mounting repression. But the people saw it clearly. Freedom had been repackaged as obedience. So when the 2025 election came, it wasn't merely political, it was existential. People no longer demanded change, they demanded recognition of their humanity. The election was the regime's final betrayal, and the protests that followed weren't about votes, they were about dignity. It was this collective disillusionment that transformed anger into a movement. And as Tanzania trembled, its neighbors began to pay attention. Kenyan Gen Z activists, still energized from their own anti-tax protests, tweeted messages of solidarity. Nigerian NSARS veterans offered cybersecurity tips to Tanzanian organizers. Cameroonian protesters compared their struggle to the decades-long battle against Paul Biya's regime. The African Union called for restraint, but its divided stance revealed a deeper fear. Some leaders saw Tanzania as a warning that youth-driven revolts could upend entire systems. Others quietly admired the courage. A leaked diplomatic cable quoted one East African minister saying, "The wind that started in Burkina Faso has reached our shores." From Ouagadougou to Nairobi, the pattern was clear. Africa's youth were no longer content with cosmetic democracy. They were demanding control over their destiny. Tanzania, once seen as docile and predictable, had become the symbol of that awakening. But revolutions don't only spread hope, they spread anxiety. And as foreign governments issued travel advisories and investors withdrew funds, the Tanzanian regime began to fear not only its citizens but the continent's gaze. The question haunting the presidential palace was no longer how to suppress dissent, but how to survive it. The next chapter of Tanzania's story depends on one fragile balance: the loyalty of the military. If the Tanzanian Defense Forces stay united behind Hassan, the uprising could be crushed through sheer force. Yet cracks are rumored to be forming. Reports surfaced that some officers refused orders to fire on civilians. A few units near Mwanza reportedly laid down their arms, insisting they were protectors of the people, not executioners. Analysts warn of a possible Sudan scenario, a temporary military takeover disguised as the restoration of order. Others imagine a transitional council emerging from within CCM itself, promising reforms to calm the unrest. Either way, the idea of Hassan's indefinite rule now seems untenable. Now, as the dust settles, one truth remains: Tanzania will never be the same again. The illusion of calm has shattered. For decades, Tanzanians believed that reform could come quietly, that dialogue, not disruption, would fix the system. But 2025 has proven otherwise. This generation, the one raised under economic strain, digital freedom, and political repression, has rewritten the rules. They have shown that fear is finite, but hope is renewable. What do you think? Are we seeing a new revolution spreading in Africa, where leaders who try to rule by force will be overthrown? Isn't it true that all this has roots in the Sahel region, which was the birthplace of this revolution? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether any other president or leader will try to rig the election and rule by force after what has happened with Cameroon's and Tanzania's leaders. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.